What's up, guys? It's Wolf with the Quarantine, and today I have a game for you by the name of Vinhos from Eagle Griffin Games. Now, Vinhos plays 1 to 4 players. It plays within about 90 to 180 minutes, and it's recommended for ages 12 plus, all of which I would say is pretty much right on the nose. So what is Vinhos? Well, thematically, Vinhos has the players controlling vineyard owners in, I think it's Portugal, and you're trying to make the best wine, and you're trying to appease these world-renowned wine tasting judges, because if you appease them, you become more famous, and then also exporting your wine to different countries, which also makes you more famous. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most points, which is fame, wins. However, when it comes to mechanics in the game, it's a little bit of worker placement, it's a little bit of area control, it's a little bit of engine and industry building, and that's really the best way I can explain it. So let's just go straight over to how the game's played, shall we? Alright, as usual, before we get started, I have to state that this is a review. It is not a tutorial, so if I do make some rules mistakes, or if I do skip some rules, just know that this should still give you a basic idea of how the game is played, so that way you can determine whether or not it is for you. The other thing being is this game comes with 2 different versions with the Deluxe Edition. You have the 2016 version, and then you have the Vintage 2010 version. For the purpose of this review, I will be showing off the 2016 version. The 2010 version, on the other side of this board, it has something that looks very similar, but there's a few things that are different, like banking and the wine testing contest and a few other minor things. But for the most part, I'll leave that up to you to discover. And I'll talk about it a little bit in my final thoughts, but for the purpose of this review, I will be showcasing the 2016 version. The last thing I do feel that I should probably say is some of you might be looking at this setup and kind of worried that it does look very busy and it looks very complicated. However, once you understand how the game plays, it's actually all very intuitive, because all of the pictures that you see around the board, for the most part, do a very good job of just explaining what that action would do. So let's go ahead and dive right into the gameplay now. When you first set up the game, each player is going to get a player board that looks like this. This side is for the 2010 version, but this side is for the 2016. So you have 5 different vineyards that you can have, separate vineyards. This is where you store your barrels, and this is where you store your money. So what's going to happen is, as you can see right here, you'll set up each player board with 1 disc in the first square of each area. 2 barrels, I hit the camera, sorry about that. You'll have 2 barrels here, and then you'll have money based on whatever position that you start in, which is the turn order, which is up here. So I think for second place you get something like 20 money. I don't remember what the money's called. We always just call it dollars. But anyway, so I think I get 20 bucks for going second. So what you're going to do throughout the course of the game is you have your little action area here. So I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, so when it's your turn to take an action, you're going to go adjacent to wherever you're at. You cannot stay in the same space. And adjacency in this game is orthogonal and diagonal. So if I were to, say, move up here, this is the action that I would take, which I'll get into what all these actions do. Now, if you move into a square that has something in it already, like in this case, you have the round marker here, I would have to pay $1 for each thing in there, and you would pay it to that thing, I guess you can call it. So in this case, I would pay $1 to the bank to be able to move to this location. So I'd have to break this 10 here, I'd get 9 bucks back. So that also means if purple, later on down the road, moves here, then that means it has to pay the bank 1 and then me 1 because I'm already there, and so on and so forth. The yellow goes here, you'd have to pay the bank 1, me 1, purple 1, and then he can go here, and so on and so forth. The other thing being is, let's say I'm here, and I really want to get down here. I can only move adjacent, but you can skip a square by paying $1. So I would be able to move that, let's say it's like this. If I wanted to get down here, I would have to pay $1 to the bank because I skipped a square, then $1 to purple, $1 to yellow, $1 to blue. And that's the way that works. Throughout the course of the game, these little green squares are the actions you're going to be able to take. So essentially, the game takes place over 6 game rounds or 12 rounds total. The way it's going to go is everybody takes one action in this turn order, then you move here, everybody takes an action, then you balance the ledgers, then you produce wine, which all of that will make sense later. Then you're going to move here, everybody takes an action, you balance the ledgers, produce wine, so on and so forth. So you're going to go from here to here to here to here to here, then to here, and then the game is over. So essentially, each person's only going to get 12 turns, and there's 6 rounds of the game. So let me explain what all these actions do. This one here, if you can see that, I'm not sure if you can see, you will, and this is what I mean by this is actually fairly intuitive. If you take this action, you can buy a vineyard, which again will make more sense. You will place a influence cube. You would spend the amount of money that's on that vineyard to buy it. You can do it once or twice. You will then place a control cube in that area. You can buy a, a cellar. Place an influence cube where you put that cellar. It costs $3. You could do it once or twice. So on and so forth. You can buy a winery. Place an influence cube. Costs $3 once or twice. You can get one of these guys, which has this little symbol back here. You can get one of these guys for $1. You can do it once or twice. I'll explain the center area in a minute. You can get a wine expert or a farmer for $3 or $2 respectively. You could do that once or twice. So you can buy one of each, 2 of one, whatever. You can export wine for, let's see the best way to explain this. You'll be able to export wine getting victory points. The green symbol here is instant victory points. The purple is endgame victory points. So you would be able to get export wine, which is down here, which is actually off camera. And you would get points equal to its overall value. And then at the end of the game, you'll get whatever victory points are here. Here you can sell local, and you would get dollars equal to the quality of the wine or the value of the wine, and you have to place a barrel. That's what they mean. And this does the exact same things up here. So now knowing that, this is all reasonably self-explanatory. So if I wanted to go from here to here, I could buy a winery, place an influence cube wherever I put the winery. I have to spend $3 or $6 if I do it twice. And again, I could do it once or twice. So that's how the middle section works. So I'll take an action, well in our little turn order here, it's blue, red, purple, yellow. So blue would take their action, purple might take their action, yellow might take their action, and I might take this action. Then this moves here, then we all stay where we're at, and now we have to take another action. So I go here, so on and so forth, like that, and then we balance ledgers. And I'll explain what that is. So let's zoom out. Okay, so let me explain what the rest of this board means. So over here, you have the different wineries or vineyards that you're able to buy from. And the way it works is you start off the game with one and you go ahead and just produce one wine with it. So the way this works is you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, because if you're playing with less than 4 players, some of these are not going to be able to be used, and some of the other resources on the table aren't going to be available, stuff like that. There are also a lot more of these that I have not put out. The stacks wind up being like this tall. We usually break them up real small like this, so they're a little easier to manage. We shuffle them up and just put a small amount of them out at a time. But anyways, what you're going to do is if you wanted one of these vineyards, you will go to the location here, like I mentioned. Let's put that back. And then you get to choose any one of these. And on them, you have, let's show what they look like here. You have the location, which is right there. You have whether or not it's a red or a white wine. This is the quality of the wine, because there's 2 different things. There's quality and value, which I'll get into. And then you have how much it's going to cost to buy that vineyard. So, let's see, this was a 6. So if I wanted to buy that, I could go, take this, it costs 5. Let's say I want to buy 2. So I'll take this, put it back, I get 5. Put this back over here, and I would take one of these, and you would put it in, you can either combine it if it's from the same location. So like if I had 2 reds from the same location, I can put them both like this. But you can't combine 2 different locations or 2 different color wines. So if this was a white wine, I couldn't put that there. I would have to put it in a new area. But anyways, you'd put it here, And then to show that you have a winery there, you'd take that cube and you would put it right there, showing that it's linked. You would then get whatever bonus it shows here. So in this case, you would get a free winery. So take one of these, they're double-sided, you would put it the side up that matches the rest of your vineyard. And then I could do it again. So let's say, I only did that once, so I'll take this 5, and I will also buy a Duro. So I'll put it here. Duro is right there. I'll put that there. So what does Duro do? Duro gives you 2 of these Duro bottles, which I'll get to. You just put them down here with your barrels. And that was my action. And then, of course, somebody else will take their action. So let me explain what the rest of these are. You have exporting. So when I mentioned you have quality and you have value, the quality of my wine would be, at the end of the year, in this case, the quality would be 2 plus 1 plus an additional 2 if I have a wine expert. I don't, so when this produces wine, it'll produce a quality 3 wine. However, we'll kind of back up a little bit. If you have a cellar, this symbol here means value. So you're going to combine your, in this case, my 3 quality, and if I had, let's see, here we go. If I had this here, that would actually be a 4 value, because 3 plus 1. Other effects throughout the game will allow you to increase the value, but this would be a 4 value wine. What a Duro does is when you produce wine, you can go ahead and scrap one of these, put it back over here, and you can just increase the value of your wine by 3. Just boom, it happens. But you have a finite amount. Once you burn these, you don't get them back unless you buy another Duro vineyard. So that's kind of how that works. Then again over here, exporting, and we'll go back to where I was. The reason why I explained that is you have, if you're playing with 2 players, you only use this little square here. If you're playing with more, you'd use the whole thing. But you have different numbers here, so let me zoom in. Okay, so the way these work is if you're exporting, you would need value of wine equal to whatever this is. So if I had, say, a value 9 wine, I could take one of my barrels, place it here. I would get 9 victory points because of what that action for exporting says. I'd get 9 victory points, and then at the end of the game, if I have the majority control here, I would get 12 victory points at the end of the game for endgame scoring. To sell local, you would do basically the same thing, but instead you're getting money. So I would go, okay, I have value 7, and is it a red or is it a white wine? You would cover it with your barrel, you'd get that much money from the bank. So that's how these work. Okay, so that's basically what most of the board does. This over here is just an area to put things. These are a finite resource, or there's only a finite amount of that stuff. So once it runs out, it's out. So it's there so you can kind of constantly keep an eye on what is available. Now there's another little tidbit that I haven't mentioned yet, is you have weather that affects the overall game. For now, I'm just going to explain right here. So at the end of the year, when we produce wine, our quality of our wine is going to go up by 1. So in this case here, where I'm producing a 3 quality, because of the weather was pretty decent for wine, I would wind up getting a 4 quality wine. So I'd take this, and I would put it right there to show I've had my wine, or I've produced that wine. So after everybody's taken their action twice, as kind of already explained kind of how all this works. I haven't explained the middle yet. I'll get to that. But you're going to go to balancing your ledgers. Now, in the 2010 version, there's a lot more that goes on during this phase. But in the 2016 version, all you do is you can take 1 barrel back from this area. And you take it back, put it back on your sheet. The reason for it is these barrels are finite. You only start the game with 2. And if this is on a red 7, nobody else can place there. So you take one of those back. And that's all you do in 2016. Then you go to produce wine. So everybody does this. You will then go, and again, as I mentioned, you will look at your vineyards here. So I'm getting 2 plus 1 plus 1 from the weather. I would produce a 4 wine. But before you produce anything, all of your wine will move over 1 space to the right. So if I had, say, I had this here and I had this here, and let's just say hypothetically I have, that's a white wine, I have that there. This is my winery. We go to produce. So what happens is this moves over, this moves over, this moves over, then everything produces. If you do not have a space for it to move over to, these grapes rot and they go back and they're gone. So that is the benefit of getting a cellar, because a cellar has 4 spaces and it makes your wine quality better as it ages. So it's just kind of strategy of how you want to do that. But that costs money and takes valuable actions, because again, you're only going to get 12 for the whole game. Technically 13, but I'll get to that. But everybody produces, so I'd get a 4 wine here, and then I would get a 3 wine here. So 3 would go here, and then a 4 would go here. And then that's it. This would move over, and then you do the whole thing over again. That's the basis of the game. Now, let me backtrack. The middle section, what this place does is, when you go there, because if you notice there's 2 turn order tracks. The top is the current turn order, the bottom is going to be the next game round, I guess you can call it. It's turn order. So if yellow went here, first thing would happen is he would go ahead and put the his place there. So when we move to here, these would all slide over, and he would be first player, or she, whatever. But they would be first player. So that's the one thing that does. The other thing, it allows you to submit a wine to the wine tasting ceremony. And now is probably when I should explain how that works. Okay, so when you submit a wine to the wine tasting ceremony over here, you will take any one of the wines that's on your on your little player board here, and you will put it here. And you're going to follow these symbols here that explain exactly what happens. So this means you get the value of your wine in ceremony points, I think they're called. So I submitted a 4 value wine, so I would go up 1, 2, 3, 4 points. Then you're going to move here, and this symbol shows that you take one of your cubes here in the middle, or discs, and you would put it in either 1, 2, 3, or 4, getting the benefit. This is going to determine the next round's turn order. So if I were to put it here, I get nothing, but I'm going to go first. But if I put it here, I'm going to get 3 favor points right around the board. So let's say I'm going to take this, and I really need those favor points. So I'm going to go up 1, 2, 3. So I'm now at 7. Then you're going to get to burn your experts for more favor points, which kind of explain what these are. On the weather, let's go ahead and put this. Can you see that? Yes, you can. On these weather, this is where the rest of this comes into play. Where you get to burn an expert for extra points, you're going to look down here on the current weather area. So if I burn a green, this guy right here, this lady has the little green symbol, that means she's a green expert. So if I burn a green, meaning I remove it from the game, I would get 2 extra favor points. If I did a yellow, I would get 1 extra favor point. So I would get to burn, those people in order to move up in favor points. So let's say I burned 1 and I burned a green, so I'll go up 2 more. Then you get to grab 2 barrels. So what you're going to do is you're going to look back at the weather tile. So you have Annabelle, Bruno, and what's her name? Carolina right here. So Annabelle likes either red or white wine. So in my case here, I submitted a red wine. Annabelle likes red wine. So if I wanted to, I can get one of Annabelle's barrels, which I'll show in a second. Bruno likes really valuable, really expensive wine. So if I submitted an 8 or more, I could take one from Bruno. I submitted a 4, I don't get that. But Carolina likes wine from 2, 5, 6, and 9. I submitted one from 6, so I fulfill her requirements. So what that means is, we'll kind of bring this up here, you have those 3 there. So in this case, I fulfilled Annabelle's and I fulfilled Carolina, and I could take up to 2 of those barrels and put them on my sheet. Obviously you can't take a barrel from somebody who doesn't have them, or if you don't meet their requirements. Okay? Then you will go right here and just kind of wait.
And the reason why you would wait is if you submitted early by going to the middle space, that's where you would wait. If not, everybody else has to go ahead and do their submitting until they reach that point. If you submitted early, you'll just kind of sit there, and then once it gets to the end of the round, which again will make a little more sense, then that's when everybody goes ahead and submits here. But then you get victory points based on your positioning. So as everybody is kind of like this, what's going to happen is who's in first place? Yellow. So you have 3 years. So you have first year, first place will get 9 victory points, second place gets 6, third place gets 3, fourth place gets a wine expert. That's it. And so on and so forth. Then you reset the turn order. So based on everybody that's up here, they're things like this, you'll rearrange the actual turn order. Then you get to, well, sorry, I shouldn't have brought those off. These would stay right where they're at. So the next year, when you do a wine tasting contest, everybody starts off just like this. So because the judges were, in this case, even because I messed it up, if the judges are predisposed to enjoy Purple's wine because they were already in the lead and they already know his wine and they know they love it. So it's going to be really hard to catch up to Purple in this little case because I screwed it up. But these are what I meant to bring down, because these will come back out once you fix the turn order. Then you go to this, means you get to throw away wine in order to get these green tokens up here. Now, there we go. Any wine that you have on a table, starting with the new turn order, you can take it and throw it away, and you just basically put it back into the tray of wine here. And you can take any one of these. So I can go, okay, well, I'll take these, and I'll get to what these are in a minute. So I get this and put it on my tile area. Then the next person does it, next person does it, next person does it. It comes back to you. You can then choose to throw away another wine if you want, or you can choose to pass. Once you pass, you're out. And it's going to keep going around until everybody's passed, or until all those tiles run out. But just know, to take one, you're going to have to throw away a wine tile. And that would conclude the way the wine tasting ceremony works. Okay, and I know this is kind of all over the place because there is quite a bit to the game, but hopefully you're still getting a basic idea of how the game works. So you do those, the wine tasting ceremony is, everybody takes an action, budget, and then you produce wine. Action, budget, wine, action, budget, wine. Once you go here, then you do a wine tasting, wine tasting ceremony there, and then once you're done here, you come back down here, and then you do it again. Action, budget, produce, action, budget, produce, and then another one. And then you only get action, budget, produce, and then a third and final contest. So that's why the middle section may or may not be important, because not only do you get to change the turn order, you also get to put a wine over in the contest before the contest happens. However, once this lands on this area, everybody gets a chance to do it. So you're wasting an action, but you're also not wasting an action, because if the weather's right and the judges are right, it might behoove you to go ahead and produce, or not produce, to throw a wine over there early. Then, to kind of backtrack again, after you produce at the end of each one of these little segments here, you'll take this weather tile, you'll get rid of it, and you flip over a new weather tile. So like that's a +1, that's a -1. Let's see if it'll there. It's not focusing very well, but that's a -1, and there's a whole bunch of them. There's -2s, so on and so forth. There's parasites where just nothing happens, which sucks really bad. This does not want to focus. There we go. There's parasites, and nobody produces anything, but the judges are pretty much cool with that, all the different types of wines. And that overall is basically the game. So let's zoom out. Okay, and that basically is the game. Now there's a few things that I haven't mentioned when it comes to these tiles. For example, you have your wine experts, and you have these here. Once each action, you are allowed to flip one of these to show that this is just something you're going to do. So for example, like her, she can look at the next card in the weather area secretly. So you'd flip this over, do what it says, and then it's done. It stays here face down. This here shows that for free, it doesn't cause constant action in here in the middle. You can just flip this, buy a wine tasting expert for $2, and it takes, you can only do it once. So you flip this, go ahead and spend your $2, take this guy and put him, in a winery. So that brings me to my next point. I didn't explain what these guys do. So if you look here, this has a quality of 2 plus 1. Plus 2 if you have one of these. So if you have one of these guys and you have them on here, this would produce 2, 4, 5. Now, put him there. And then you have farmers. Farmers can only be put on the vineyard itself, not the winery. And this just adds plus 1 to its value. So this would also be a 5. So 3, no, that would be a 4, sorry. So this would be producing a 4 quality wine. However, if I had both of them, one here and the farmer on this one, this would give me a 3, 4, 5, 6. That's a 6 quality wine. And again, if I had, because each area here has 3 squares, if I had this, and they both had wine experts on it, and a farmer, that would be a 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's a 9 quality wine. And then if you get that sucker aged in a cellar, the cellars can go all the way up plus 5, so that's a plus 14. Then there's a couple other minor things that I didn't mention that some of you may have noticed. I think that's there. Some of you may have noticed is how I mentioned you can put influence cubes down when you take certain actions. So those influence cubes are these. Whenever you take an action that says to put an influence cube, you'll put it on the proper location. So you get one, and I would have gotten one as I got this location here, which goes here. If I built a vineyard, or not a vineyard, a winery or a cellar, and I put it in the 6, I would get to also put another cube. And if I did another one, I'd put another cube, and so on and so forth. And they can only hold 6. Now what these do is at any time you are going to spend a wine, for any reason, you can spend, you or anybody that has a dial here. Because if Blue, I'm just going to take this, if Blue also decided to buy a 6 wine, he would do that. He would put that there. So at a glance, I can tell that both Orange and Blue both have a Lisboa wine. So I would have to worry about him spending these. But you're allowed to spend up to 2 of these, put them back, and you increase the value of your wine by 1 for each cube that you increase. Now, there are a couple ones like the Alentio. I'm not even going to try to pronounce that right. For each cube spent, you get plus 2 to the value instead of plus 1. Then, the last thing I'm going to explain is these purple tiles here. Once you're done with those magistrate tiles, which is what those are called, those green ones, and everybody's passed, you discard all of those. Then you refill them with any remaining green, and then you go to the purple ones. Now, these purple ones are endgame multipliers. So for example, you're going to get 2 points for each cellar you have. When you take one of these, it works the exact same way. You're going to have to scrap a wine at the end of the contest, and you can pull one of these. But when you get one, you have to also take a barrel and place it on here, and it stays there permanently unless you get a expert that says that you can pull it back to your board. If you do that, you do get to keep the benefit. But for the most part, once you take one of these, it stays there and takes up one of your barrels. It may not sound like a big deal, but when you're exporting wines here to try to get points, stuff like this, you're trying to sell them over here, you quickly, very quickly run out of barrels because you also need them for these as well. And that, for the most part, is Vinhos. I know it was a little confusing. I was kind of all over the place, but there's a lot of information you need to know. But as I mentioned, if any of you guys have been watching and following along, all the symbols are fairly self-explanatory. So let's go ahead and go over to my final thoughts.
Alright, Vinhos. Well, as I mentioned, the game is super busy. When you first pull out the board and you set everything up and you look through the rulebook and see how to play, you're going to look at it and go, holy crap, what did I get myself into? Everybody that I brought this out to, even veteran gamers that play a ton of games, even looked at it and was like, whoa. And they also thought, I'm making wine, that sounds dumb. However, after usually the second action or so, and you start to kind of get how the game flows, and you look at the board, you realize that all of it kind of makes sense. You know, these pictures, you look at them, they blatantly explain how this action works, and so on and so forth. So it's actually not as complicated as it initially seems. To be completely honest, I haven't tried, but I would say my 9-year-old daughter would probably be able to play this. It's not that complicated once you get over that initial hurdle. However, a lot of the wine tasting experts are kind of confusing because you have to sometimes look up what they do because their symbols aren't quite as intuitive. They are, but there's a few of them that are just kind of confusing. And so you wind up having to refer to these little reference sheets here, and where is it? Like this one here kind of explains what they all do on either side, and then I think there's a couple in one of the rule books. And each player, I highly recommend, give each player one of these. It gives you kind of a little cheat sheet for the 2016 version, which is here, and then the 2010 version, which is here and here. So kind of it will help them out and explain, you know, how the game works. But other than that, with the wine tasting experts, almost everything makes sense. And it's a very brutal and very cutthroat game. Last night we actually played again, and I won by 9 points. It was almost 1 point, or I would have lost by 1 point, but somebody added some things up wrong. But every game that I've played, usually first and second is less than 10 points. And so the game is super cutthroat, super brutal. Money in the 2016 version anyways is always hard to come by because you never seem to have enough money. And remember, to move into a space that somebody's in, you have to pay for each thing that's already there. So you can also screw over anybody else. You know, if I need money, maybe you go to the export or to the sell area, sell some wine, you make a few bucks, but you also screwed me out of going there unless I can pay you to also go there. And it's happened a bunch of times. Or you don't want somebody doing something and you see they have a lot of, you know, don't have a whole lot of money, you can go to a place specifically to screw them out of that. And the fact that the festival, the contest, the score that goes around, that doesn't reset. So if somebody's winning, you know, you get a lot of points from that. You know, at the end of the first contest, you get, 9 points for first place. The second year's contest, you get 12, and the third year's you get 15. And those add up. So if you're consistently in first place with that contest, you're going to get a ton of points on top of anything else you're doing. You know, end game score multipliers, or end game money, or the exporting, and all of that. It stacks up. However, I've won a game from losing that contest every round, and I just kind of ignored it and went with, double downing on exporting and end game multipliers and stuff like that, and I won. It's a lot harder, much harder, but you can do it. And overall, the game is stellar. Like, I cannot recommend this game enough. Now, let's go to the 2010 version. I'm not going to dig too deep into it. There's a lot of differences, like the banking is very different. Instead of in the bottom right-hand corner where you see all those pieces, so you know how much is left, instead that's a banking area, and then you have to deal with stocks and interest and stuff like this. So it does make things a little more complicated, and it makes the fair, or the contest, a lot more complicated. So it does complicate the game. However, so I'm not really going to talk about that one that much. But the 2016 version is hands down the way to go. We enjoyed that one a lot more. It's easier, but still very deep of a game. It's less complicated, whole 9 yards. And then the fact, with the barrels, you only get so many of those barrels back. So you may have an awesome wine, but nobody really rewards you for that wine or something. So now you're maybe going to get a barrel. And you're like, okay, well, do I put my crappier wine in because I need more barrels to be able to export and so on and so forth. And it's just overall a very, very good game. Components are amazing. All the little barrels are outstanding. Just the little details, you know, the fact that your barrels look like little barrels. They could have totally gotten away with just little orange, you know, or colored cylinders. And your for the Duros things, the little wine bottles, and they stack up, and that's so cool. And that's only in the deluxe version. And just all in all, I really don't have a lot bad to say about the game. And I know I like to always put in a few negatives for games that I like, or a few positives for games that I don't like. And honestly, I can't think of a lot for this game. There's not a lot bad about it, except for the fact that that initial hurdle to learn is a little steep, but not that bad. And I would say maybe some of the vineyards that you can get are downright useless. Like there's some of them that just can't have cellars, but they're cheaper. So they're not even really useless. If you're running low on money but need trash wine to throw away for the magistrate tiles, maybe they behoove you to get them. So there's really not a lot bad that I can say about this game. The game is excellent, and if I'm not mistaken, it's like $100, something like that. And you essentially get 2 games in it. And on top of that, which I didn't mention in the solo or in the overview, the game plays solo, where basically there's an AI that you go through special things with it, and it follows its own rules and whatnot. And it plays well. I've played that one time, but it kicked my shit in pretty hard. It is a very ruthless AI, but it's still, I don't want to say feels fair, it feels terribly unfair, but it's still fun, and you learn tricks when you're competing with other people. So I highly, highly recommend Vinhos. The game is excellent. Go out, pick it up if you have the money, and you won't regret it. It plays 2 players well. You know, all the stuff scales depending on the number of players, 2, 3, and 4. Haven't played it with 3, so I should probably throw that out there. I've played it with 1, 2, and 4. And all those player counts, it scales well, it plays excellent. Another thing that happens with that weather, the unpredictability of the weather is huge. We had last night, the game deciding thing that wound up happening that caused me to win is parasites raided everybody's vineyards, and nobody got to produce wine that year, which all your wine still ages, but you don't produce any. And my brother didn't account for that. He was hoping to be able to produce a really good wine and to be able to go in the wine tasting contest and win and blah, blah, blah. And because of that, he wound up not winning because of it, and it actually went to me because of that. So that unpredictability of that weather, you have to account for things happening, and it's an outstanding game. I really cannot praise this one enough. The game is outstanding. Go pick it up. Anyways, that is my review for Vinhos Deluxe Edition. Anyways, if you like my channel, power right there. I have a Patreon if you'd like to support me up there. Any little bit of help would be appreciated. If not, sit back, enjoy the show if you like it. If you want to give me a thumbs up down there in the comment. If you didn't like it, go ahead and give a thumbs down, whatever. But you can go ahead and subscribe to my channel if you like it, and go ahead and comment. I read every comment as well. I'll have my Twitch and Twitter down in the description if you'd like to check those out. And I will see you guys next time in the quarantine.